Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Amosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello, and welcome back to Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. I am Chris Morgan, and I am here with my friends Joe Soria.
What's a dazzling urbanite like you doing in a rustic setting like this?
Scott Thurlow.
Are we doing a strong podcast here, or are we just jerking off? Come on now.
Amen.
And today we are continuing with our comedy month homage to or salute to Mel Brooks. And this one's my pick. It's Blazing Saddles. And Scott, do you have a log line?
Yeah, I mean, a black sheriff worked in Blazing Saddles. That's where it all started.
That's right. That's right.
And Scott, why don't you continue with the plot?
I shall. So a fella named Bart, who happens to be a black man, is building a railroad. I think it's like, early 1900s ish or so in the mid out west or so.
I would say this is the late 1870s, 1880s, after Civil War.
After Civil
War. Reconstruction, basically.
So it's on the cusp of the turn of the century of 1900s, and they're building the railroad, and they're in some nondescript western town, and he escapes from the railroad with the sort of corrupt, I guess, wranglers, we'll call them, and also like their boss, the corrupt official, of course, corrupt corporate guy, local administrator or whatever, and he wants to, of course, own the railroad, and they have to build it through a town called Red Rock. He wants to drive all the people out of Red Rock.
Rock Ridge, not Red Rock.
Red Rock's the thing from the Tarantino movie. Whatever. Rock Ridge, a small western fringe town. So he enacts his plan to, convolutedly so, if Bart's in jail, if he's like, well, instead of hanging this guy, let's make him the black sheriff. The townspeople will hate that, and they'll all leave. But instead, Bart, the black sheriff, sort of unites the townsfolk, like sort of endears himself to them, solves some of their problems, and they come together to enact a sort of classic Mel Brooks stages plan to fool the bad guys and get their town back and retain their town and expose the corruption of the administrators and so forth. And that's pretty much it. And they do. And then he rides off in the sunset with his Gene Wilder, who's become his partner. And that's like pretty much it. There's a lot of details here and there, a lot of jokes, of course, connecting it all, but that's pretty much it. So again, I think we've done this. This is the fourth and final Mel Brooks salute film, and I'm pretty sure I've done it in every one I've been on. It's a 175 rounded up to a 2. There's enough of a plot there. It's not like, I don't know, maybe you're saying precast, Joe, you might disagree, but I think it's like coherent enough. Like he goes through the things, like I said, and becomes sheriff. Everyone likes him, and he unites, rallies them against the enemy. So, and then jokes connect the rest of it, and that's pretty much all it is. And not all it is, but that's what it's composed of. So I think that's enough on one front for a 1, the other front for another 1, equaling a 2 for a plot. So that's where I stand.
Yeah, I think this one's light, honestly, comparatively to some of the other ones. I haven't watched all of them, but to me, this movie is like as super. Yeah, of course, they're all super tropey. The last time we were like, it's Robin Hood, the plot, right? And he literally just takes the plot of Robin Hood, which is already in existence. This is a Western, but like, I don't even know. It's kind of like small portions of 3 movies that like don't matter and have, especially all of the subplots mean almost nothing in this movie.
Well, they're more jokey than most other ones, I would say. At least
yeah, they're light. I mean, the Madeline Kahn, all these subplots, they're like, it's just like they even get introduced so late into the story. There's like a whole opening portion that they're making the railroad, and then that just kind of disappears. It's like 30, 20 minutes where they're like out there, and then they come back at the end when he needs saving. Right now, I'm gonna go with this is like a 1.33 rounded down to a 1. And
I get it.
And I'm solidly in the camp of this movie is does not earn a lot of the plot points that it gets to. It just kind of rides from room to room, and not a huge, didn't really get much from the plot here or the narrative.
Fair enough. I don't begrudge you that. I see it, but I'm still sticking with the two. What do you think, Chris? Given it's your pick and one of your favorite Mel Brooks films.
I'm going to give it a 2 as well. Because it is one of these things where you have to delineate between, it's like with Young Frankenstein. I felt really bad about giving that a 2, but you do have to kind of delineate between, like, you know, what the plot is and what the shtick is. Sure. And, you know, it's I quite enjoy the story. And I know this isn't just me saying this, but yeah, I've known a diverse groups of people who have also kept bringing this movie into my focus. It's one of these things where I went to see it as a kid. I mentioned, I don't remember if this is on the last cast or precast, but you know, way back when in the 70s, like films would stay in the theaters for years. So I actually was taken to see this when I was 6, kind of understood the jokes when I was in high school. Every time I'm like wondering how this thing sits, people keep bringing it out of the woodwork and be like, oh, we'll throw a Blazing Saddles quote at me. And I'll be like, all right. And I realized rewatching it, like, oh yeah, we'll get to this when we get to dialogue. I'm like, yeah, I do quote this movie a lot too. I mean, not as much as Young Frankenstein, which has basically worked itself into my vernacular. But I agree with you. It is a Mel Brooks thing where there is a plot and it's easy to kind of lose the plot and the shtick. But I think it's a solid enough plot. And yeah, I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah. Can I make a note that I just think there are plot, but and I think he does this consistently, but they grind in each point. You know, there isn't anything driving these movies, and it always is like it's about the joke, it's not about the story. So, you know, it's definitely one of the weakest points of most of these movies because it grinds its gears, and you know, and it's trying to really like get that 3 times joke over and over again. You know, if it's not funny, just keep doing it and it'll be funny eventually. And you know, maybe I watched this movie solo, hadn't seen it before. I'm the only person here who has not seen this movie before, but you know, I just kind of like, I'm not someone who likes to go hang out with the phone, but you know, it's getting close. It was getting closer to my hand when it was like certain points. Like, I don't get what's going on here. So,
fair enough. No, I get it.
The funny thing is, cause we are going to, you know, I did bring, I'll get to it when we get to dialogue, but about why I made mention about a diverse group of people who keep bringing this back into my, put it back on my radar every time I think I forget about it, because there is a lot of issues he deals with, and in a way, and Scott, I want to encroach on themes, but I understand that this can kind of be one of those films where you're not really sure if you should laugh or not. But I watched it by myself again today and I laughed my ass off. So just,
I feel you. You know what, Joe, like I'm still gonna stick with it too, but I think I would say like it's a 1.5, which means you can round it up or down either way. So like, I get that, like at least in this one. So I'm just saying you sort of convinced me to temper it just a little, even though I'm still sticking with it too. But I do think it's completely fair to go down to a 1 in this case. And like I said, you can sort of go either way. So I'm fine with what we just gave it, but I get you.
And Joe, I think you're right about the way he constructs his movies. And that's why I'm always saying, like, you know, Young Frankenstein probably to me has the tightest narrative, like with regard to editing, pacing, because you weren't on the 12 chairs, but one of the things about the 12 chairs is we were like saying like the editing was weird.
It was a little off, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you.
And this movie's a vignette movie where it's like looks like people show up for the one scene and then they just disappear for the rest of the movie, and there's almost like no overlap a lot of times, and yeah, I don't know, just the strings not there. And I'll give the opposite side here, where I don't know what you're saying of they're a diverse group of people, but I mean, Barack Obama like praised Mel Brooks for making this movie. So if you want the ultimate praise of like he loves this movie and it's embraced by both cultures or multiple different types of cultures as being inspirational, it's there. But I just didn't jive.
Yeah, I knew that you had said something before that kind of twigged it, so I better guess the thing. But yeah, I have so
yeah, you're saying narratively, I get it, and yeah, I'm cool with that.
All right, so Scott, let's move on to you with themes then.
I thought it was Joe for themes, but
sorry, Joe. Let's move on to you with themes. This is what
doing something else. I have themes. Themes of this movie. Racism is a theme, and not judging a book by its cover. Uh, uh, Again, it's a comedy that there are definitely things that are brought out, emotionally and historically and our significance wise. But for the most part, I don't have any hard and strong themes. Frontierism is like a general Western theme, but there's nothing in here that's outside of the standard tropes of what it is that I really pulled out of it. So I don't know. Maybe you guys will find some super digs on it, but I'm going to give it a 0 for just kind of being a comedy. That's the theme that, if you're not going to laugh, if I didn't cry, if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. And like redemption, I guess, a little bit, but those are pretty standard, and I didn't really find too much to connect to here, so I'll go with 0.
I don't know. I kind of have not a rant, but a number of things to say about it because I somewhat disagreed, not strongly, but to a point where this is probably, I would conjecture to you, gentlemen, in the cultural zeitgeist at large, possibly Mel Brooks's most well-known and most well-remembered film. And I think precisely, like, it's defanging racism. It's mocking bigotry, like via its comedy, via its plot. Now, not all the way through, but it is certainly a strong point. Like it starts out with that, and it's lampshaded and so forth, and that's why I think like it's well remembered and well respected, and was sort of maybe we could say ahead of its time a bit. Now, granted, we weren't there, but I still think there's like that sort of sentiment to it, and I think that is the point where he's trying to, as Ian might say, like in order to depower something that's hurtful is to mock it and make fun of it and defang it, and I think that was his intent. And yeah, while the jokes may not always 100% land on that front, I think that was the intent and the nature behind it. And on that front, I think it does work well. I think it does have something to say. And the major theme I would say is like just respecting people. Like you're not all that different. Like that's really like he earns the respect of people in town, even though they're bigoted against him for no reason other than the color of his skin. And I think it's addressed there. And then they're all friends and they unite against a greater evil, like an even worse enemy that's even more bigoted and will never change. And they're outright said to be evil, corrupt, etc., like wrongheaded. So I think it's pretty strong to me on that front and kind of always has been. I think it's one of the major intents. And that's why I think it's like, again, sort of known for being ahead of its time, being a landmark film because it touches upon that stuff and does it, yes, in a comedic way, but also respectfully enough at the same time to me. So that's why I'm thinking I was always going to give this a pretty strong 1 because that's what I always saw in this film. And that's what I think a lot of film critics and just audiences in general, I think, extract from it. So with that, that's my speech reason for giving it a pretty damn strong 1. And Chris, I think you want to speak now.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. And that was the intent. And when I say that, when I said the diverse thing is because a lot of people did bring up over the years. There's a buddy of mine. We used to work weird attempts at this stupid bank bursting checks, and we made people very uncomfortable with our rapport. And he's one of the ones that made me realize, like, like political correctness. It's just like he was the one who brought out the themes of Get Out before Get Out. Like, sometimes white guilt takes over and everybody tippy toes. And, this is a film that we would quote a lot. And the one thing I forgot about was Mel Brooks being the Sioux chief. And while they did darken his skin, I did love the fact that he took on a New York Jewish, German Jewish accent. In other words, he was not trying to. I think he was trying to make a point. The fact that
it was another like social commentary joke that at least that seemed to be.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like he did not play it. It's just like, okay, I'm dressed here, but let's not pretend I'm this person. There were meta aspects. Not even the meta aspects to this film I always thought were really appropriate. I love the Count Basie shtick. Yeah, I think I really got the themes a lot and a lot, watching this now versus when I first saw it when I was 6 and the various times. And, it's one of these films that does stick with you. And it is a point of discussion, where I have talked about it with, with people who weren't white, you know, who weren't men. I'm not
white bread us. Sure.
yeah, and I'm not religious at all. I was not raised in any religion, you know, my wife's family's Jewish, and you know, it's just like my father-in-law loves this film. And my whole point, the point I'm trying to make is it is one of these things that now the day and age where everybody kind of walks in eggshells for one reason or another. And, you know, I'm not going to get into that because I think everybody's guilty of pointing the cultural whatever finger at each other. But I think this film does a great job of defanging things and using that meta aspect. So I don't think I added much more to Scott's thing, but I did want to bring into that thing. I did want to bring up.
See what I mean, and you agree with my
but I also did want to bring up some personal experience because I know some of the stuff can be a point of contention, but I think the film is very self-aware, so I'm giving it a very strong one.
I guess to me, a lot of this stuff that you guys are saying, I don't hear much specifically themes. I hear like script or maybe even style of like representation of the movie. Because to me, well, I'm just saying, I don't think they're like, they're all, if you're saying everything's everything, like to me, there isn't much, there's a lot of representation and idealism, but it doesn't seem to like fall into like being thematic throughout the movie and being carried through. It's more part of the vignette feeling to me, like the joke you said, like, oh, you know, I'm not the family thing for you. And he's like, his joke is like, you know, my mom's Dutch or something like that, you know, that type of joke, which is effective, but it's more in the script that it's portraying the dialogue theme than the other. So I don't know, Chris.
No, I've got a point because, excuse me, to Scott's point about the themes are, you know, we're all the same and look through the,
okay.
But the thing is there's also a realistic approach to that, being able to change culturally, to be able to accept people that are different from you and to really see the person, that it doesn't happen overnight. For example, that the old lady who saw him on the street and said, F-U-N, and then later on after he saves him from Mongo, she brings him a pie and then comes back and says, I hope you know, will tell everybody that I wasn't here, or not tell anybody I was here. And saying
she said,
that,
thank you for not telling people that I talked to you, or so, I think.
Something like that. My whole point is to Scott's issue with the themes is it did not take an idealistic approach. I mean, we accept the sheriff, but we're not going to accept everybody. Okay, we'll accept this. We'll accept, you know, the black and the Chinese, but we won't take the Irish, which was a great subversion. But what I'm saying is, thematically, yeah, the jokes and the shtick do tie into it. However, if you were to take it from a narrative focus on it, things like the old lady, the things like the way the town reacts, where they'll accept this person and this person, and that, you know, in order to prove, it's like kind of like in order to prove your worth, it's like, well, what are you doing to the dominant culture? There was a criticism. Amber Ruffin did this criticism of the Roseanne show, where she got to like her Muslim neighbors because they shared their cable Wi-Fi or whatever the fuck it was. And it's kind of that thing that he addresses in here. It's just like the acceptance does not come free. It's just like, you know, it's just like shitty people, good people prove their worth to shitty people to get them to accept it. And I think that really plays into the themes that you said, Scott, before. And that's why I'm saying that, yeah, you're right about the jokes and so forth, but I think there is a deeper undercurrent to what everything goes on to support the themes. So
I think there's an interplay there, and I think it's strong enough for me for one, and I've always just seen it. So, you know, you can say maybe it's a little dated. Sure, of course it's going to be some of it because it's a 50-year-old movie at this point, but I still think it's strongly there. And I guess the last point I'll make is like Mel Brooks being a Jewish man, I would submit certainly also faced some prejudice and bigotry in his life. So I think it was more like he could put it into the film and step into the shoes of other people who are also doing that. And yeah, again, you know, put some comedy around it to sort of soften the blow, but at the same time, still have a serious thing to say about, you know, cultures coming to an understanding and a mutual agreement with each other. So that's I'm done.
I think a lot of that leans actually on, I think Richard Pryor was one of the co-writers here. And I feel like that's where you get a lot of that voice and that feeling in it. So, you know, now we can, you know, get to the dialogue and script, whatever later, but I think that's actually where that leans to. I'm not going to overgive Mel the shtick on it, but yeah. Okay.
So you're sticking with the zero then,
I'm
Joe?
sticking with a zero. You know, it's not the strongest, like, is nothing redemptive about it, but I think a lot of the things you guys are talking about bleed into other things.
Flow
and
into
everything is straight
other
to
stuff.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
fair
not
enough.
not gonna.
Shit, I had no idea. I'm sorry. I was just looking up. I did not know that Richard Pryor played into it. A lot of things are starting to make sense.
It kind
now.
of makes sense. You never knew
Well,
that. Yeah, like
Yeah,
I
he's
think
supposed to
it's in the
play
credits.
Levon also. I mean, he was supposed to be the main character, but had drug problems. They wouldn't back him as an actor in the movie. So
The
he's a
insurance
writer.
reasons.
Yeah, so he's a writer part of it, but he didn't, you know, so his voice is there, but he doesn't get to say his voice, which might be one of the reasons where it's like a half-hearted attempt of like a cover song, you know, in essence, sometimes to me. But you know, that's, you know, another read. So
It's a funny
still
analogy.
sticking
Sure.
A lot of things came into focus all of a sudden.
All right.
Okay, so that leaves me with antagonist. And this is really funny because, you know, if we're going to talk about like thematically, yeah, the antagonism is ignorance, the antagonism is racism. The antagonist, Hedley Lamar, is kind of like the focal point of both for the racist ignorance and the bureaucratic mentality, because he plays the bureaucracy great. The governor is just this fucking figurehead who only cares really about, you know, getting laid in his
Banging his secretary, obviously. Like, it's such a cliche.
and his political prowess. And Hedley Lamar, sorry,
Headley.
I fucked it up.
Headley.
The whole joke.
Headley really is the focal point for it because he really manipulates the two. He's bumbling and he's, you know, but he's not. He's kind of obtuse, but he's not an idiot. He's just
He knows how to game the system, even though he's a racist dickhead. Like, I don't know what else to say.
I don't know. It's one of those things where like he will manipulate. Yeah, he's a racist dickhead, but he's also one of these people who just wants to accumulate power more than anything.
And he's a con man as well. Like, you know, basically, essentially.
Yeah. So funny enough, I'm going to give him a 1 because he does play his role of taking the bureaucratic mentality, applying it to the muscle mentality, appealing to racism and identity politics in order to get what he wants, placating. You know, he is weirdly like kind of like a combination between, you know, like Trump and a lobbyist. You know, he kind of does both parts without like any real exchange of money. You know, he plays to the crowd, he plays the audience, he knows his audience, and he's got a motivation. He's smarter than Trump. And you know, he's about as smart as most lobbyists. So you know, I got to give him a 1. I think I in a weird way, he is he's a much more dynamic character than I remembered him. So yeah, I'm gonna give him 1.
What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I was also wavering on this, but maybe I'm doing this like context in retrospect type feeling where we did the Robin Hood Men Tights, and you just changed the name of this to the sheriff of Rock Ridgingham. You know that this would be the same character, and all he had to do is like mix around his words. You know that he's turned down by the hot chicks, and he's turned down by this, and he's like bumbling, and he's recruiting everybody in sight. Like, to me, this, you know, the Hedley Lamar joke works like once. The gang is kind of a fail. The Mel Brooks, you know, governor character is like a one scene scum bum type thing. Like the antagonism of, you know, keeping the black man, like keeping like people down and enslaved or, you know, defeated or, you know. So the only reason I think I'm going to go with a 1 is more of the he actually does drive the action and, you know, is trying to go in there and usurp the town and steal the town away. And that drives everything. So in that essence, he is definitely going to be the antagonizing driving force, you know, obvious villain to Bart and Jim. So I will give it a middling 1. And yeah, funny enough, but contextually, having watched this after so many other movies, you know, it doesn't stick out so much more than anything else in the movie.
Sure. No, I feel that. I'm gonna go with like an okay 1 too, but still a 1 in the day, because yes, like he at least knows again how to like play the bureaucratic game system, and he has his, like, basically the other guys, like the railroad guys, are his dragons, his henchmen, pretty much. So like they're part of his, again, his racist, corrupt crew, and they're trying to force the town to, like, you know, get their profit out of it and run them out of town. And they enact their plan to it. And he hires all like the criminals and stuff like towards the end. So I think like the heroes, if you will, do feel antagonized by his actions, at least, if not by him specifically. But I think sometimes also both. So I think it works well enough, and because of that, because of the clash there, and yeah, Chris, I do agree. Like he's more rounded than you might think. Like he's like just a little bit more than a one-dimensional villain, but mostly one-dimensional. But at least he has some other facets to him here and there that like sort of add to him as a character. He's not just a joke, and like I said, he's effective at being a corrupt executive pretty much. And he knows how to get around the bumbling governor, played by Mel Brooks, of course, like a classic Mel Brooks role, like possibly the classic of all classic Mel Brooks, like cameo guest roles of like the character he plays. But I'm saying it all makes sense, and I do feel like the townspeople and Bart and Jim do struggle with fighting them, and while they may come out on top in the end, they outsmart them. They are trying to. It's a chess game. They literally playing chess at one point, like throughout it. So I think I'm just saying the villains are effective as like representative, as a vehement ideology, like one that you should disagree with, but they're also, again, the actions they're doing and how they're going about it is a wall against the heroes, and I think it works. So I'm going with a decent-ish one, maybe a little stronger than yours, Joe, but
I think also that list of people that he recruits, like to me, that was like the standout, like of all of his things, where he lists basically every single human being except for a black person. So to me, it's like, that's the archetype of like he's listing out, he says either other slurs of things that he would accept into his gang in order to defeat the guy that he put into power. So I mean, that was kind of like over the top final, that and the Slim Pickens as like the assistant, and kind of a couple other good little things there. Like as a team, the gang there actually isn't awful. I've seen worse Wild West evil gangs, I guess. What mustache twirlers.
Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't remember that he was a little more than, as you said, Scott, a little more than one-dimensional character, but nobody else but Harvey Korman could have played this, because he's got a fastidiousness about him. Like the whole gum chewing thing, he's like, bring enough for everybody. Boom. It was just, nobody else could have played this role.
I hesitate to say this, like, you can say like he's almost like a borderline like Nazi-ish character, like in terms like in a very vague general way. But they even like they say like, oh, he's super strict, right? And like he's handing out medals and stuff. Like I'm saying, like little sprinkles of moments in which I think one can extract that kind of interpretation is all. But generally, he is like a mustache. He's like a robber baron, right, essentially, from the Old West movies, and like he's a parody of that. But he's still like grounded enough as a villain, I think, and that's all. Sorry,
he gave me the vibe of someone that I remember Chris not liking specifically, and not liking the actor, but the villain in North by Northwest. But then he actually gets to be funny versus just being shitty. So like, if he had really like no part, no lines, and was just there and was I don't know if he's British in this movie, but it's like that kind of like pompous delivery of every line, like he's gonna say the fanciest word that he can say that comes to mind. It's there, but he has the kind of like bumbling, and I think the interplay scene when he's trying to like charm like women and do other things, and he fails all the time. That kind of is more endearing and gives it different elements and angles.
Yeah, he's meant to look foolish because he's like the Captain Bigot, if you will, and so like I think again, just quickly going back to themes and to a little bit, like that's the intent there, like to show how really foolish he is in the end. But even though he knows how to manipulate the system, in the end he loses because he's so narrow-minded and about a lot of things. So I think that's why it's effective. And again, this little posse as well, like the classic henchman, the classic like outlaw gang that he enacts, and then eventually hires every sort of other like ne'er-do-well, except
Is he the King Bigot comparatively to Jeffrey Lebowski, who literally, for a moment,
I was waiting, like
to hold on to that one.
I was waiting for that for secondary because I thought you, Joe, personally might be pleasantly surprised to see.
Oh, I know who David Hiddleston is, sir. Thank you.
Fair enough. I don't know if you knew he was there.
We'll save for Chris later. Yeah, Chris,
we'll get to it, Chris.
Secondaries.
It's a funny little shared actor thing. But anyways, one pretty strong, decent one for me for Antag, and I think you guys are also doing the same, or at least giving it a one.
Yep. So it's ones all around. And Scott, continue on with protagonist.
All right. So I think like in this case, it's certainly Bart, and I forget his actor's name. I don't remember.
Hold on.
Cleon Little.
Aren't I doing protagonist? Not to do spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Chris is fucking out a lot. Maybe.
No, Scott started off with plot. I did antagonist. Scott's back
Sorry
with
if I'm ruining
protagonist.
everything. Okay,
All
then I
right.
You're
wrote that
supporting,
wrong.
buddy.
Okay,
All right.
sorry, my bad. Thank
Either
you.
way, we're fucking up like Mel Brooks style. But so if it is protagonist, it is to me. It's Bart and Jim, and mostly Bart, but like they become partners pretty quick. And I think that like that's also the other angle. Like Jim is not racist, so he's just like it's sort of an old. His backstory is he was like one of the fastest gunslingers, right? And now he's like a drunken, like sort of has been, and they sort of partner up, and they're very friendly to each other from the moment go, like essentially, and they enact their plan, and they get the townspeople on the side, tell them what they're gonna do, and I think Bart's very charismatic. Like again, he's initially, of course, not if not hated, like shunned at least by the townspeople, just again by nature of the culture he belongs to, essentially, like as a person, but through his noble actions and like sometimes comedic, but at the same time, he has the best of intentions to be the best sheriff he can against, again, the bigoted crew that we just mentioned, an antagonist. So I think it's like a 60-40, maybe even 70-30, 70 Bart that is. But Gene Wilder, of course, does a good job as he ever has, and is a great sidekick, essentially. Like a little bit more than a sidekick, but not quite like an equal buddy movie, if you will. So it's sort of like in between the lines there, between the gradients, if you will, between that scale. But nevertheless, I'm going to count them both generally as the protagonists, and I think they have good arcs. They do a good job. They have a good rapport, especially with each other specifically, and also with, like you said, Joe, like the various vignettes that happen throughout, like each one when they're either both there, like when Bart talks to Madeline Kahn, and like she's like basically she's like sent to seduce him on behalf
Seduce him.
of Hedley Lamar, and like she basically ends up being seduced by him instead, and like and falls in love with him, and he's like off we to Zane, baby. They all like he's all like cool about it, like whatever, like so that like, again, you're right. It's a good subversion. It's funny and it works. And I'm just saying, like, and that adds to his character. He's basically on their side from then on. Like she turns against the villain, and like she's like, yeah, this is a good guy, and I'm gonna join his cause. Mm-hmm. So I think it's effective on that front. And like I said, they have good arcs. The script gives them very good stuff to work with, and they do a good job acting within it. So I'm giving them a pretty strong one on the protag front, and a lot of credit there. And that's it.
Yeah,
Joe?
I think same. I'm gonna stick Bart as the main protagonist. I'm gonna leave. I mean, I'll mention Gene Wilder, but in my world, he's in the secondary
like
for a number of reasons.
It
because
could be a little iffy, like whatever. You can sort of do both, and I don't mind which way.
He doesn't show up for 30 or 40 minutes, which is actually the best thing that I think Mel Brooks sometimes does, is leave aces in the hole. And in this instance, he kind of leaves a good ace in the hole, but that makes him a supporting actor. I think there's actually, this movie would have benefited from more of the Cleavon, Gene magic. Those scenes are probably the best. Like that scene, the best scene in the movie to me is the scene when he's getting, in the jail, basically. That first, the meet, I don't even call it the meet cute these days, but the meetup, the first connection is the magic scene. It has all like it has the most rhythm back and forth. It has the most comic cleanliness. You have that, explanation of why he turns from being the Waco kid to just Jim because he's shot in the ass by a 6-year-old, like this is, but this movie starts with Bart and it ends with Bart, even though they're together, because he brings in the people to the savior. I don't want to take away from him being this being a black protagonist movie, because I do believe that this movie, holds on that strength as being one of its calling cards, because Gene Wilder is not a savior. He's, helps out. He is an associate and assistant. So I'm going to give it a strong one for Bart, and for Cleavon Little being charming, good, and even in the sight of, we just discussed it a little bit, like I think, okay, this could have been Richard Pryor. And, we discussed a little bit before cast about that connection of Gene Wilder with Richard Pryor in many other movies, and, how you kind of would love to do this, but that would have become a Richard Pryor movie. This movie is separate from the shtick of Richard Pryor because he's not in it. So I'm going to give this a good, strong, black protagonist, black power, and, turning the other cheek, but not fully, and remembering everything. And, he's good, quiet, like Clint Eastwoody, but still like with a smile vibe that he gives off. So strong one for Bart / Cleavon Little.
Yeah, so he's a quiet, cool, and like I think I just thought of this, or I meant to mention it. It's almost a subversion unto itself, where the white guy is the sidekick, like I said, to the black main protagonist character, right?
Yeah.
So even like I said, in my mind, it's still kind of a buddy thing, but it's more heavily weighted towards Bart for sure. but I'm still counting Jim either way. Like again, as the whole joke unto itself, to play on the trope is that he's basically he's a deputy, whereas Bart is a sheriff. So I don't know, but still sticking with the one, and I do like all your points, and now I will let Chris speak.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Bart being the main protagonist. Yeah, and Cleavon Little. All due respect to Richard Pryor, and it's so funny because now everything in the world now make a lot more things in the world make sense knowing that he wrote this and co-wrote this. But I think the chemistry between Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder is spectacular. I think Gene Wilder is a great sidekick. This is probably my favorite role of his, believe it or not, because I think Gene Wilder was probably a very generous actor, where he just kind of wrapped being a supporting character around him and allowed himself to be that supporting character and really, give his fellow actors the room they needed. And Cleavon Little just is outstanding. I mean, I love Richard Pryor, but I can't imagine anybody else in this role besides Cleavon Little. I mean, really, I remember my buddy and I we used to quote this film all the fucking time. And Cleavon Little actually died while I was working with Will. And we were both like, oh man, we were like so heartbroken because because he was just such a charismatic, charming, handsome. He does this role actually for comedic movie called for so much charm, so much I'm trying not to use the word grit. Scott would know why, but
use it in the podcast.
It's a work thing. But it calls for such subtle dynamicism. Is that a word?
I like that. No, that works. Yes.
Yeah. And I think they worked well together because they both are subtly dynamic, and Cleavon Little is without question, to me, the protagonist, and it is his thing. And I think the reason that Gene Wilder and he work well together and allow each other in their protagonist and supporting role. And Scott, I can see why you would give Jim Little
either way. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. Because I think they were both very generous actors, and I thought they had great chemistry. Yeah. But Cleavon Little just carries himself like that scene. That was another scene that like Rich mocks all the time. Will and I used to mock all the time. Like the way he pulls the gun up, like I was watching it today, waiting for him to like put the gun to his head and says like, nobody move, or he gets it. And like, it was like such a quick thing that he did. I mean, his comedic timing was great.
Good point. Yes.
His comedic timing was great, but it was just, you see guys like these guys, and it's just, they're amazing. So I'm giving
it for sure.
Yeah. So I'm giving Bart, I think he was an extremely well-written character, one, but like all props to Cleavon Little. I mean, I think of all the great actors and the great comedic actors in history, I think he's often overlooked. So very strong one for protagonist.
Right on. And you did the call in the beginning, Scott, but you probably should bring it back here on the cycle. I mean, the Dave Chappelle role, like kind of eases from that, even though it's secondary in the Robin Hood Men in Tights. It has that same vibe, and the reason you respond to it, has the same. He's basically kind of taking the same mannerisms of like the cool, like standing. He has the same colors and the outfits and everything else. Like you have the joke where he has that, the hat, but it has backwards cap and has the little dots in it. And this one, he has the Gucci bag, right? So it's kind of like a call out to like being a little like connective tissue of he has a template here. So this is setting a template for a strong black hero that doesn't just take shit, but it's not like a Shaft where it's like he's whipping people and doing craziness. Like he's kind of these crazy. It's a crazy honkies, but he doesn't say it all the time. He says it with his face. So exactly. That's what I'm gonna.
But I'm gonna say this about the hero character, is that so many times, especially nowadays, you've got a hero character like Bart, and it's just like they kind of rely on his muscle. but you really get a sense that this guy is a great tactician. I mean, like little things like he's like, I just invented the candygram. I'll never get credit.
That's still one of my favorite jokes, Chris. Like it's so like if you blink, you'll miss it, but it's so funny to me.
Yeah, but I mean, there's such. I mean, the characters are so nuanced, but I did appreciate in a film like this. You know, it would be so easy to take your protagonist and show him that he's this muscle guy rather than like saying, no, you know, and they really leaned on his wits. They really leaned on his intelligence. They really leaned on the fact that he could read a room and work it. So yeah, he's a great protagonist.
Yeah, I have one final footnote, like because Joe just mentioned it and made me think of it. Maybe this is a bit of style, but something I always thought was funny, like, especially as I got more knowledgeable and older, is like even his sheriff getup, like it's almost like a kind of a black exploitation, like kung fu kind of like reference. Like it kind of looks like that kind of costume, but just old westernized. And I always thought that was kind of like a funny little subtle like touch as well. So yeah, it all really works. And
I think it actually leads also to that he's not a white hat and he's not a black hat, which is the standard for your westerns. He's a brown hat, right? He's his own thing. Yep. He's like he's golden almost.
Exactly.
And so
he's got his own style, and
his own style. He's got his own profile. So that's
good call. I like that, and I just wanted to mention that because you mentioned the Shaft thing. I was like, I just thought that was always a nice little funny, again, little flourish.
That's a great callback. I didn't realize that. I'm like sitting here. He's wearing one color outfit, and you know. The red looked better than the mustard yellow, almost. but like now it makes 100% more sense. So Joe, we're gonna move on to you with supporting.
So like I said before, we already went through pretty deep in Gene Wilder, but I'm gonna put him in this category. I think in general, I had some mixed bag with some of the other performances. We mentioned the antagonist and some of that being okay, and some of the secondaries. You had the weird Mongo character thing that I assume people like, but I don't know.
Alex Karras,
who was a suspended football player for gambling. But like some kind of goofy kind of big character is always something like that in these type of movies.
He's like the dumb muscle who actually has again, they befriend him and he respects them and becomes part of their crew.
And then you have the whole Lily von Stupp segment, which, everyone that knows Yiddish knows what Stupp means.
Von Stupp, that was the whole joke.
I believe that it's actually, they said that in the TV, they just changed it to Lily von Shush, I think, or Shuh, because even they can't have them say Stupp on,
sure.
I prefer her name, the Teutonic Titwallow. I think that alone was worth bringing her on screen.
It's classic Mel Brooks gag.
And then he's like, then the one line that she goes like, he's like wet sauerkraut in my hands. That is like you had to do the German joke, but that was a good, like, what is wet? Why would you want wet?
What is that fucking?
I know what it's
still funny.
Like by definition.
It's like he's like I don't know. It's like he's going through your hands very saucily, and you can't wash them off very easily, and you're probably gonna have to take a shower to get that shit off your hands.
You think about that, you're like, that's not what you would want, but I guess
no. So and they have the dual Mel Brooks roles that we mentioned. The Schwarz's Yiddish joke, the hangman call out. Like I like that, but for the most part, I don't have any super standouts that I loved in this movie. So because of Gene Wilder, I'm going to give this a 1. And Madeline Kahn and the songs that they perform and some of that elements, but there's not as many actual supporting. There's a lot of almost small pieces over and over. And I'll leave Scott, our buddy David Hiddleston. So otherwise, not the strongest one. It's strong because of Gene Wilder, but everyone else. Not my favorite of these type of batches of supporting characters. So that's my opinion.
Fair enough. Like I get it. Like I'm gonna try to convince you, I guess, because strong men also cry. Yeah. So like, and again, I hate to like try to steal stuff or have to steal stuff from the next questions, but I sort of have to make my point in that. Of course, if you put Gene Wilder in secondary, it's an automatic 1, and I get that. Like, I don't know what else to say. But even because I'm not. I think it's all like the sum of the parts, I guess, equal to 1, like all added up. So yeah, Catherine Hahn's, or was it Catherine and Madeline Hahn? I don't remember exactly now.
Madeline
Kahn. Catherine Hahn is the witch from the Witch Show.
Okay.
Whatever her name is. Yeah.
Either way, like you're right. Like she's vignette-y, but I still think like she becomes, let's say, I don't know, 1.25 dimensional or something like that. Like so she's introduced just as a one-off thing, but then becomes part of the greater story. similar to like one of my favorite jokes is all the townsfolk are like Howard Johnson, Jimmy, like they're all Johnson. Like it's literally on the fucking board. And like, yeah, and so David, like he's like a prominent prominent townsfolk, and like at first again he like many other are bigoted, but then become friendly. Like the school teacher woman too, like the mousy lady with the glasses, the old lady, like all these little like slices of life, little characters from this old Western town, I think work quite well. And I guess I don't know where else to put Mel Brooks as governor. I would have to put him, I think, in secondary, like supporting more or less. And like he, again, it's like the most quintessential Mel Brooks. Like when he puts himself in a movie, he's going to put himself in a role exactly like that. And I think it works. So I'm saying like, I may not feel like as strongly. And again, especially since I did divvy up Gene into like a buddy protagonist thing, but I still think even like in like, especially also Bart's like railroad friends and crew. Now, granted, like only one guy sort of has a name, but like
Charlie.
Yeah,
I was just looking it up.
Yeah, they're part of it. So like they show up here and there, but I'm saying like it's because it's part of the greater story. I think it's fair to count them and like give them credit there. And I just think it all sort of works generally for like, what'd you say, Joe, earlier? Like a middling one. Like it's good enough. And yeah, like the hangman guy, Robert, whatever, I can't remember his last name, but
Robert Ridgely.
Yeah, it's the same. He just
same joke.
It's the same. Even kisses the guy in the forehead before he hangs him. Like the literal same actions and stuff. But all
he's
I'm
wearing
saying,
the medieval outfit in fucking Old West. They like, we have a hangman. We have to put him in
like
that outfit.
It's so random, but like it also is like it makes sense as a joke if you think about it for a second. So all I'm saying is like it to me, it still all works collectively. Like this cast of characters sort of like make it or woven into it and make or loomed, if you will, as a tapestry of decent supporting characters that sort of round it all out and keep it grounded for the most part. Yeah, they get absurd here and there, sure, but to me, like I think it works, and I'm gonna give it a solid one. It's middling to solid, like just bordering on solid because of that, because it holds itself together more than it doesn't, I guess is the final thought I would say. And that's why I'm going to rest on a 1 for supporting.
I'll just be a little bit on this. To me, the problem I had with this movie and sometimes with comedies is that these don't feel like roles at all. So you're calling them supporting, but they're just a joke. They're one note. And, to me, when you have a good ensemble and supporting, it means they have a character behind them. You mentioned his black friend. I forgot the name.
Harley.
He has Harley. He has a purpose. For leaving the antagonist out of it, like he has a role. Everyone else, it's like they have 1 or 2 jokes that they're there for, and then they just disperse, and then you just have crowds. So like the ending of the movie, which is kind of just like an off the rails, like one like super note that has nothing to do. It's like I wanted to do a musical. We're gonna do a Busby Berkeley joke, for like 10 minutes and then show the studio and all this other fucking out of this world shit.
Meta stuff.
It's like meta, and there's nothing that you get to sink your teeth into. While like going back to like Young Frankenstein, you have 3 or 4 supporting roles that really have gravitas. Have the assistant, and you have the Madeline Kahn, and you have the other assistant. You have what's his name? The Hunchback. So like to me, they actually have personalities. I couldn't tell you that the Johnson thing doesn't help because everyone has the same name, and that's the joke. But that to me actually exemplifies it, that everyone's a Johnson and no one's.
That's true. Like I get you there.
So, that's my.
You're saying it's a bit less less substantial than versus specifically Frankenstein and maybe some other things.
It's not an ensemble ad. It's not a value add as much as in many of these type of movies where you get kind of a bench of like tight, the Robin Hood Men in Tights. We get a Blinken, you get a Dave Chappelle, and you get all these things that they all have something that really stick out about them. To me, it was kind of blended together, and that's but
I kind of get you there.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, what do you think?
Sorry.
I'm giving supporting a 1. As I said before, I think Gene Wilder, his character's great. But Joe, to your point about characters having gravitas, I think Charlie is an important character. When I think back in this movie throughout the years, Charlie is one of the characters that comes to mind, probably right after Madeline Kahn's Lily von Stupp. But he is important because he and Gene Wilder do serve the exact same purpose. And I like the fact that they're not threatened by one another when they actually do have scenes together. And I know it's a comedy, and I know there's not, they're kind of tangential in it, but a lot of times when you have overlap, you have somebody supporting the protagonist, drawing things out about his character, it's really easy to make them one dimensional. It's really easy to put them in at odds with the next sidekick, and it just kind of I think that they're both great supporting characters, and that they show the kind of people that Bart does bring in. But I do like the caretaking nature of Charlie. That he is somebody, he is a confidant. You know, he's not. They are legitimately friends in a compound full of, you know, people who are in the same situation. You know, they are legitimately friends. They do look out for each other. They do provide a certain amount of
they're essentially the cavalry. Like, you know, his buddy backs him up, and
yeah,
the rest of his
but,
crew.
but I mean, the thing is, he does help round out Cleavon Little, and it's not, you know, he's one of these people who, you know, basically is the one that's like grounds the comedy and says, you know, what you're doing has repercussions. Don't do this. You keep in mind, you know, because it's so easy to get into slapstick and have him hit Slim Pickens without any repercussions. And Charlie's trying to warn him, and he's like, "Oh, it's worth it," knowing that, you know, he's kind of resolved to the fact that this will probably get him killed. So, like I said, my whole point is I don't think the importance of Charlie, in that he is a predominant figure for, I don't know, a good portion of the first quarter of the film. I think he's a very important character. And, you know, I absolutely positively cannot say enough about Madeline Kahn, her role in this. That is one of these songs I've never in my entire life forgotten. Again, it's one of these songs I sing all the time. Again,
Classic Brooks.
It has worked. It has worked her, you know, her way into, you know, when I get fatigued,
You've unstuck your mind.
Yeah.
I'm always like, I'm so tired. You know?
So tired.
Sure.
I'll hold
All
that
right.
note a little bit longer.
Take it
I
easy.
just,
You know,
I know, but the thing is, yeah, you know, a lot of them are kind of one note, and it's easy to confuse Madeline Kahn's personality and portrayal for a character. But I'm going to say that, you know, Charlie, as far as supporting characters go, Charlie and Jim are by far the two most important to Cleavon Little's characters. So I'm going to give him a 1.
yeah, I feel like that would, you know, it makes sense, but to me, it's definitely, there's some lost opportunity to make better use of the bench here, and I think that is lost. You know, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but we didn't even mention like the little cameo at the end, which is Dom DeLuise, you know, and it's kind of a weird, you know, thing. You said to Count Basie, but I did look up, and it looks like the nunnish Lady Johnson is Dom DeLuise's wife, who was born in Hackensack, New Jersey.
Interesting.
Oh, really?
Jersey.
And
Yeah,
apparently, Anne Bancroft, Mel Brooks' wife, was one of the members of the congregation.
and Max Brooks was born during the making of this movie. We can read the.
Was he really?
Yes.
Yeah. Right on.
So that's probably why she was on set, because she was making the baby.
That's why this movie's important.
So that's why this movie's important, because Max Brooks was born. So yeah, I don't know. It's okay. I've seen better ones, so I'll just I'll leave it at that. You know, and not.
So, but you are giving it a 1, right? At the end.
Yeah,
Of the day?
yeah, softer one, but I'll give it a 1. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hey,
I
Joe,
also, sorry, I was
go
gonna
on,
say,
Scott.
you did kind of temper me. Like, I'm still giving a 1, but yeah, maybe not as strong of a 1, Joe. Like, you do make some very good points about like they could have been used better in better ways, but all I'm saying is, like, still in my mind, at the end of the day, they collectively add together. And the one we didn't, or the one I'll throw out, is like the old. Again, it's such a cliche, such a trope. Like the old drunken mumbling guy, like basically the old miner
Yosemite
guy.
Sam,
yeah.
character.
Like, so he shows up at the beginning and like does his thing, and then he shows up at the end with the fight, and like he's like, I don't know, like it all works for me. But even if I'm dialing it back just a little, because I do think you made some very important valid points about it, but overall supporting still solid. So.
And just real quick, the song they were singing at the end is called "The French Mistake." Joe, do you have anything to add on that? Do you know what the French Mistake is? I meant to look it up before the podcast. Was that a song written for the movie, or was it?
I'm not sure. I can look, but you know, we'll get to it. I guess at some point.
I was going to say, because
I'm not sure. I know that you know, most of the movies that I think Mel Brooks wrote all the songs, and I know that there was one joke. The first one, the one that sounds very serious, the Blazing Saddles song. like he actually put a listing in for the person. He's like, I want a style of this person to do the song. And that guy's like, I'll just do the song. Then you don't need someone to do that style. So he got like the Western guy to do the Western song, but the guy didn't know it's a joke movie. He thought it was a serious movie. So we recorded Blazing Saddles as the most serious song for some Western. So I thought that was a very funny, like meta super joke that
All right, because there's an
I did
episode
not know
of
that, and I
this-
love it.
There's an episode of this of Supernatural Beth and I are fond of. It's called The French Mistake. And it wasn't until I watched this morning. Anyway, you're a plethora of trivia, dude. That's why I figured I'd ask you.
The French Mistake is definitely a reference to history, but it's escaping me of what it actually is referencing to.
Given Mel
might be a
Brooks,
World War II thing or
it's
something,
probably
but
the Nazi, the Nazis
Nazi
coming,
stuff, yeah.
the surrendering, but
that's what I think it is, but I don't know 100%. But anyways,
anyway, given Mel Brooks, that might be it, but it's up to me with dialogue. And I'd like to start this with something I've wanted to mention since we started this podcast. I have been waiting for this movie to tell this story. And I've warned my mom for years and years that when this time comes, I was going to say it. So 6 years old, we're sitting in a movie theater. And they had the scene in the jail where Cleavon Little's talking to Gene Wilder, and Cleavon Little's like, what do you like to do? And Gene Wilder's like, Jim's like, play chess, screw. And, Cleavon Little's like, let's play chess. I go to my mom. I'm like, what's screw? And my mom goes, fucking. And that I understood.
Stupping is also another word for it. Yeah.
I didn't know what stupping,
would have been better
but
playing that too when
Stupping
you were
is the
6
same
years
word.
old.
Yeah.
I know that, but I know that now. But at the time I said, what's screw? And my mom answered fucking. My mom said this to a 6-year-old in the movie theater. So
Shout out to Mary Lou if you're listening.
Mary Lynn.
Well, if you want to
Whatever
do
your mom's name
stories about parents taking people to wrong movies, my dad took me to Sex Lies and Videotape at 9. So
There's a plethora of films I saw before I was 10 I probably shouldn't have in the movie theater. But I think the dialogue's great. I think
it's a different time.
I think it's got the it's got the Mel Brooks trademark that always flip-flops between vaudevillian slapstick and really intelligent, clever double play. Again, I love the fact that I keep coming back to this film at different parts of my life, because more and more of the jokes unfold as things happen, and the subtleties of the dialogue, like Lily von Stupp's song. There are so many little great lines that went over my head before that I picked up today as it's
Always
like
coming and going and going and coming, sometimes too soon.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe Mel Brooks, you want to do your trivia? I believe he said it's the nastiest song he ever wrote out of every song that he ever wrote.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Well, I know my father-in-law loves this movie, so I suggested to Beth. I'm like, why don't we bring the Blu-ray player up to your parents' house, or the Blu-ray to your parents' house? Because I'm like, I'd love to see this again right away. And I know her dad would acquiesce to it. But no, I don't really have much to say on the dialogue because I could sit here and recite the film to you. But let me just say, it is a high watermark. It does show the intelligence of all. I don't want to say it was Mel Brooks, because Richard Pryor and a few others went into writing this.
Everyone involved, though.
Yeah, but it's definitely has that. It definitely blends the vaudevillian with the double entendres, and it actually is able to tell the story. And one of the things I love about his movies, especially of this era, is the dialogue, even as weird as it is or as random as it may seem, really do contribute in telling the story, really developing the characters. And that's a real talent in that he directed it, and that maybe he worked with all these writers and so forth to help focus it. The dialogue is just fantastic. So I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah.
Joe.
I don't know. This was again kind of like we're doing with this the performances. This one is on the weaker side for me too. There were a lot of things that fell flat for me on this movie, and I always wonder when we do this, if we're counting these songs as the dialogue, because
I think it's
they're
fair too.
in the movie, but they're not. The movie is that style. Where does that lie? Because dialogue to me is them talking. So for Mel Brooks, about a third of these movies ends up being singing or dancing or doing something or kind of a rhythm experience. So the song, the "I'm tired," like that type is like a kvetching, like standard, like old Jewish men's song coming out of, you know, Marlene Dietrich. You know, is like a perfect. Like a perfect combo that I still kind of didn't laugh. Like the song was funny, but I almost didn't laugh. Where I was like, this almost seems like too on the nose a lot of the time. And I don't know. I feel like I have some awkward responses to Yiddish humor from my upbringing that I'm not like over the moon on it sometimes, and the whole vaudevillian thing. So I'm gonna go soft one for, you know, some of the good lines, some of the good delivery, but it's not my big winner of all of this type of stuff. So one of these are gonna get a 0 because of these softness, but I'm gonna leave dialogue with the songs all intact as a 1.
No, that's fair. And I think you're right. Like it's sometimes a little like you're right, like odd. Like where should we put like the musical interludes, if you will, like, you know, the opening thing and her song especially. And there's one more in there as well. At the end when they go to the fucking movie studio and like this bursts into like a different fucking film being made apparently, or at least essentially like a music video dance thing or whatever. But I mean, again, if we've given all the other Brooks films 1 here, like I don't see how you can't as well, because yes, like while some of the jokes are somewhat dated, like from 1974 or 6 or whatever year it was, Chris, I think 74.
Well, some of them were dated in 1974, I think. Some of them are jokes to
sure.
the 20s, you know. So
sure, like that's where the vaudevillian thing comes from. Like, and yeah, I suppose your mileage might vary, and like how what your response is to like how funny or like, you know, amusing you think they are. But like again, that's so, to me, Blazing Saddles is the Mel Brooks film. Like, and because of that, like you're right. Like, and I agree with you still, Joe. Like, I prefer Men in Tights. Like that is my favorite Mel Brooks film. But I still think,
and we said that's because it was when we watched it when we
right.
were kids. Just like Chris is giving out this list.
Exactly.
Like I will heavily admit that's the one that's stuck in my head.
Yes,
so.
I mean, and that's the nostalgia factor there. Like I get that, but I mean, I thought you guys might bring up one like, and I did not understand this joke till much later, but Headley versus Hedy Lamarr, like, and it's it's one of those Mel Brooks guys that just, maybe it plays on too much. Maybe they do it like one too many times or whatever. But like, I still think it's funny because now knowing like who you know what he's going for there. But all I'm saying is overall, like again, the snappiness of it, like, you know, again, the referential stuff, it works. And is it the strongest of Mel Brooks' dialogue? Maybe not to me personally, but I still think it does keep itself together for the most part. Like 90% of the way through. Like, sure, you could say there's a few stumbles here and there, but I do think the songs mostly count. And that's as well classic Brooks stuff where he loves writing those little like funny little songs or whatever and throwing them in there, like sort of having them somewhat be relevant to the plot, even if they're like can also maybe sometimes feel like non sequiturs or something, but it never veers too far, I think, out of left field. So all I'm saying is like, yeah, if I'm going to give everything else a 1, I'm giving Blazing Saddles a 1 to dialogue. I think it all holds together. Maybe you're saying, Joe, a little softer. That's fine. I get that. But to me, solid enough, certainly good enough for a 1.
Well, we mentioned it, I think, beforehand, but it does, you know, similarly, it's just, it feels like a find replace of like his whole career is just kind of like, let's put the Western tropes in and use the same jokes. And like, even I thought you'd call it out eventually. I don't know where would it have, I'm gonna have to do it, but there's a throughway toll scene. Like there's literally a toll scene in both of these movies. There's a hanging.
I actually forgot about that
both
too.
Both these movies, they're in a tower and they're in a upper part of a building looking down. So you know, it's like, wait, did you even do exterior tower, exterior, like outside hangman? Like, come on, guys, like, you know. But that's the joke that like, oh well, if it worked the first time, you know, let's bring it back. Let's keep bringing it back. And you know, does anyone have a dime? You know, like it's a good joke, you know, in essence, like they could go around it, but instead they're going through the toll. So, you know, and I want to call back one more time to that you said it, that part of that scene where they're in the chess joke, but I still think that scene is the best written scene and has the best performances because it's continuous. A lot of these other ones are like, I'll make one joke with one person and one joke with another person, and we'll kind of play ping pong. And I think that kind of scatterbrain part of it, I I don't respond as well to that like screwball when there's no feedback or loop or continuity. I don't like it like screwball for just the essence, like except for Hey I Bet, then we're okay, but that's totally different.
The Hey What?
Hey I Bet. No, that's like from Men in Tights, where there's like non sequitur jokes inside of it. But I respond to that because I was a kid. But soft, decent enough one. So like I said,
I'm just gonna mention one more thing because this film's making me nostalgic. I'm remembering my buddy Will when we were working at First Chicago, and how we'd quote this movie in other films and make people really uncomfortable. We used to have these bursting machines with checks. So Will would hide behind it, and people would come and be like, "Hey, I'd be like, "Hey, boys, looky here." And Will would pop up and go, "Where are the white women at?"
Okay.
Yes, I had to bring that up because it's completely inappropriate, but it's to. Like that film makes me laugh, and that's one of the things. That was one of the gags we'd always pull at the place we used to work to make people feel uncomfortable.
Well done.
Well done. Congratulations.
Yeah. We were the two of us were in our early 20s, so I'm not giving his last name in case he's actually like having something respectable other than being a temp. But
it can be subjective, like certainly, like, and that's always going to be the case.
Yeah.
So sure, like in the same way that Joe and everyone else, and again, Chris, our generation, we were like, you ain't getting no toes, you ain't getting no rolls. You'd be like, what are white women at? Like, I get it. Like,
yeah. But having the copying machines really, the check bursting machines really help play into the, give us a nice prop.
Okay.
And Vasquez Rocks was in this place. All right. So Scott, let's move on to you with Scott Style.
So like, again, it's the same thing that I've said when I was on all the other previous Mel Brooks stuff, where they go hand in hand. Like they sort of, you cannot extract one from the other, I think, because that's how Mel Brooks does his stuff by and large. And therefore, like, so yeah, of course, like you said, Joe, he's satiring the Western. So some of the shots are actually quite nice, like the town, like even like the vistas and stuff, because it's supposed to be mirroring like one of, like, let's say like the John Wayne-ish era of Westerns, right? Like the era when they were serious, or like, playing it straight. So it looks real nice. I still think it looks pretty crisp, even for being from 1974. And
it's shot in panorama, like it's shot with real like Western film stuff. So like with the panorama and the high scope or whatever you call it.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's aesthetically, like cinematographically wise, like it works on that front, I would say. And just again, when it does like when it goes into the slapstick, when it goes into like the screwball stuff, like again, like you said, Joe, granted, like your mileage might vary about it, but I think he knows how to shoot that stuff, knows how to make it, like, to weld it into the film. And whether or not you respond to the jokes itself, like, it's still composed very, very well. I conjecture, or I submit to you guys. So again, I don't see how you could ever give Mel Brooks, any Mel Brooks film, a 1 to 1 and a 0 to the other, just because of the fact that they're just so, again, tied together in such a way that they're married to each other, that they both gonna get a 1 always, and this one's no exception for me. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say about style. Like, I can point to you, like, here and there, like, here's some things I like, here's the joke I like, this and that, but it all works because that's how Mel Brooks is, like, sort of, if you will, that's his stick. And I think he's very, very good at it. He knows what he's doing, even if he does sometimes repeat stuff. Like, if it works, it works. And again, to me, Blazing Saddles is his film. Like, you can trace a lineage back to, say, Frankenstein, and forward in time to Men in Tights, to Dracula, to whatever, to Spaceballs, even anything else. But this is the one, but in which all other of his films, in my mind, sort of connect to, like, link to, go back to. So 1 for style, and that's me.
You want to go first, Chris? I feel like I always step on your stuff. Why don't you?
We're running a little long, and
okay,
I've been like throwing nostalgia at you guys and bringing up every person I've ever joked about this film with. So I'm just going to say I'm going to give it a 1. I agree with everything Scott says. Joe, move it on to you.
Okay. I was going to ask if we were going to put into Chris's nostalgia corner, have a little sound effects so everyone has like a little dream, like a little Mel Brooks going for a dream mode. But to me, I think I did the same thing for Men in Tights, where it's like one of these has to kind of like be a style 0. Like something has to be a 0 here, where something here isn't ingenious enough, where it has the same shtick of like signs, like the whole joke, like 80% of the jokes are just staring at signs where it's like, okay, I get it. And they're funny signs, you know, but they're the same thing. And they're in this same slapdash mode of the problems with the story and the script themselves. Like, how many times can you use the, not basket, the Howard Johnson joke and then make the orange roof of the outhouse? And it's like, you bring the same joke back, and the where's my froggy bathtub scene. And even they just like, do we have an ending? I guess the ending is we're going to go fight into the middle of a Busby Berkeley dance number and kind of have some gay jokes in it. Like, these aren't style stuff. They're just like vignette. And so I'm going to go on a 0 for style overall, even though I like the style of the cinematography. And I did look up that the cinematographer won the Academy Award that year for filming the Towering Inferno, and also filmed The Longest Yard in the same year as well. So, it's funny that literally that year he's did four movies and, won the Academy Award. So obviously he's got a good eye, and you can see it. But I think they kind of like leave that behind once they just do close-ups of everyone in the town and, rebuild, or they don't rebuild the town. They just film the town again. It's to me, it's a kind of all standing on pixie sticks, where it's like, it's about to fall down a lot of this movie when it comes to the style part of it. So I'm going to go 0 on this.
I respect your stance there. Like, I don't necessarily like, technically I disagree with it, but I don't think that it's so far out there that, you shouldn't do that. Like, I get it. I just think, like, again, to me, like, there's no way I personally am ever going to give any Mel Brooks film, or at least these ones and many others, again, dialogue / style, are going to get a 1 because they're so entwined to me. But I respect your stance, and I see it. Like, it's maybe you're saying like it's a little bit of a weaker foundation on that front. So.
All right, I'm good, Chris. Let's wrap.
Okay, so why don't you continue, Joe, and go on with recommend?
Yeah, I think I've been leaning back and forth on this, and it's just I wouldn't recommend this to the average person, because unless you were kind of basing it, and it would have to be a certain type of person that really liked these type of movies. I think this is a movie that has a time and has an importance, but it's also not a movie that I would just go out and say, you have to watch Blazing Saddles, and then they come back to me and, depending on the person, just give me the like, it's not, it doesn't jibe with current movie making skills and standards, so to me, in its place, it's a good movie. I find it amusing in good spots. I really like the main 2 performances, but I think that really does lull, and I do think it's not the strongest of Mel Brooks's films, in my opinion. So I'm gonna go with 0.
That's also fair. I mean, I'll let you speak last, Chris, since it's your pick and your favorite, but I think it's my 3rd favorite Mel Brooks film. Again, so take that as it is, but I would still broadly recommend it. And like, I don't know, it's again, amusingly personally funny to me that you, Joe, yourself, have never seen this, because I know you're such a film aficionado and like all this stuff. Like, I'm like, when just quickly, when you were texting me early in the week, I'm like, you really never seen Blazing Saddles? Like, I just find that strange. But regardless, I would still generally recommend it. Like, yeah. I know a lot of my friends and crew like have seen it, and if anyone hadn't, I'd be like, yeah, I think you would enjoy it. Now, yeah, you're right. And maybe like it's a little bit more of a historical artifact versus like, the sensibilities that you said of the modern times. Like, sure, I get that. And I
mean, there's a lot of stuff here, like we were talking about in the last movie we just did, and it was like, there's some sensitivities here. I would be very reticent. I'd have to give a couple of like warnings of like, there's a lot of there's a lot of profanity. There's a lot of like, these movies are now PG-13, and this is a hard R with like R on top of it. So like, this type of movie usually would fall into kind of like being jokey, but it's rough. This is a rough, edgy movie. And it was edgy then, and I think it's edgy now in retrospect.
That's kind of why I would still recommend it. And like, if you want a little trivia, like I happened stumbled upon this that apparently, so when it was Blazing Saddles, I rented it on Amazon. Now I guess it seems it was on HBO Max or something, like briefly. And a la Gone with the Wind, they put like a disclaimer at the front,
right?
Like to your very point, like, and I get that. Like, I have sort of neutral. It's fine that they did it. They didn't. I don't think they had to, but I'm not like they shouldn't have done it either. Like, whatever. But yeah, sure. Like, maybe like just a bit of a caveat warning, like it does contain some of this stuff. But I think again, just real quickly going back to themes, like the point of it, a lot of it is to defang it and to mock it. And also like just have some legit funny stuff in there, and
Right.
also good performances. So all that to say, those are the reasons why I would more broadly recommend it than I wouldn't. And I'm gonna mark you down for a 1, please, Chris.
Well, to me, there is definitely a there's one other thing that I think I had read was this is the first time they put fart in a fart sounds in a movie. I don't know how that's possible.
Awesome.
That's more of like a historic artifact. Like, okay, this is the first fart movie, and let me tell you, they went full fart. Like, you saw those beans, and I've seen that movie now. You're like, they're gonna be farting, ain't they? Like, that's what's happening in a Mel Brooks movie. Like, when you show a gun, it's gonna shoot. When you show beans, it's gonna fart. So to me, that's like kind of the obviousness of some of the super joking that like I didn't 100% respond to, and then kind of turned me off. And
Sure.
I just that's all. I'll stop there.
I got you. Good, Chris.
It's really funny that you say that this is the first movie where they had fart sounds too, because generally speaking, I'm more of a puke humor guy, not so much of a fart humor guy. And
Subtle difference.
you will usually, because puke and fart are used in different contexts, whatever. But I have to say that, watching it now, knowing what was going to happen, I still laughed at this scene. So I think it's amusing, that little bit of trivia where it's the first movie where they added fart sounds is great. I'm definitely going to recommend it. It's not my favorite Mel Brooks film is Young Frankenstein, which Steve-O beat me to. And I think we both agree that it's not only one of our favorite movies altogether. And I think it is a better, it's a tighter narrative than this is. But this was the first film I saw that really employed a meta aspect to it, which I didn't quite grasp at 4 years old or 6 years old when I saw this, but I rode with it. And yeah, it's actually, I find it a lot easier to watch than, because the N-word's used a lot in a lot of films, and, Tarantino uses it an awful lot. And sometimes I think even me, who's a social libertarian pretty much, and it's like, fucking do it, whatever. I don't, I think this film has a more of a point to it rather than just being part of a social construct. So I'm going to give it a 1, and I can definitely recommend it without any kind of apprehension. And that's about it. So our final scores are, Scott and I give it a 9.
I knew I was going to give it a 9. Like, just quick, going into this review, I'm like, I'm probably going to give it a 9 unless someone makes some crazy argument. So yeah. And
I was about to say, I was trying to do my best to give Young Frankenstein a 10, but I walked into it and like, I'm going to give it a 9. Joe gave it a 5, which leaves us with an aggregate score of 7.666, which I guess we're going to round up to a 7.7.
it's really funny. I believe, if I remember correctly, on IMDb it has a 7.7. I think aggregate. So
No.
so it's kind of spot on. Like I think maybe it could be a little higher, but I am totally fine with that average.
Dude, you're absolutely fucking right.
Yeah, like I could swear I just briefly looked at it, so there you go. Like that's probably pretty much spot on, and for all the reasons we just said, and I get it. So yeah, good job, boys. Give it the right score.
Battles. I'll do some more singing for you later, Chris. All right.
Sing us on the outro, I suppose. But yeah, I'm totally
I'm
fine.
so tired.
I am legit tired, but I'm satisfied with that score. And yeah, good job.
So, all right. Well, unless anybody has anything else to say, I'll say yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. I'm Chris Morgan, and I've been here with Joe Soria.
Hold the happiness. We are in trouble.
And Scott Thurlow.
And I'm going to go build my own fake town and have it destroyed sometime soon. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We shall see you next time. Cheers.
Hand to the left. There's Warner Brothers. Okay.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Or Mott's?